simply abandon him. The blizzard is intensifying, a trucker's voice crackled across the radio. Yet Hank was resolute. He exited his vehicle, battled his way through the snow, and guided the unfamiliar man into his truck's interior, shielding him from the harsh gusts. The following day, the entire locality was astounded as Navy Jeeps formed a line before his residence and a uniformed individual emerged. Hank Monroe, aged 61, led an unassuming existence as a long-distance truck operator in a suburban area of Pennsylvania. The ingrained furrows on his countenance narrated sagas of innumerable miles traversed on the nation's thoroughfares, and the subtle unsteadiness in his right lower limb served as a memento of his military tenure. A past logistics NCO in the Marines, Hank had taken early retirement following a minor mishap on a supply run in 2004. The injury was not critical, but it was sufficient to steer him towards civilian employment, exchanging military convoys for commercial transport. Each day proceeded with an identical cadence: drive, arrive home, mend something aged, and enjoy an early morning coffee at the highway service area. His neighbors recognized him as the reserved veteran who consistently had tools available for loan, though few invested the effort to truly understand him. December ushered in an unforeseen snowstorm that swept through the northern region of the state. Meteorological advisories cautioned of unprecedented snow accumulation, yet shipping schedules were unyielding to any tempest. Hank had committed to a delivery in Maple Creek by morning, and commitments held significance for him. As darkness descended, the intensity of the snowfall increased. Flakes comparable in size to large coins struck his windscreen, compelling Hank to reduce his speed to a near standstill. By the stroke of midnight, state law enforcement had barricaded the roads further on. Marooned amidst a procession of trucks, Hank steered to the side, leaving the engine running to maintain warmth within the cab. The CB radio emitted sporadic bursts of conversation from other truckers exchanging information. "There's an elderly gentleman standing by the roadside for a while now. Must be stranded," a voice emerged through the interference. "Steer clear of it," another trucker grumbled. "Who has the luxury of rescuing some unfortunate individual lost in a storm?" Hank peered through his windscreen. Indeed, a stooped figure stood in the snow, clad only in a light jacket, nearly motionless. The exterior temperature had plummeted to 15 degrees below zero. No individual could endure such conditions for an extended period. He did not pause. Despite admonitions crackling over the radio, Hank donned his woolen headwear, fastened his substantial coat to his chin, and ventured into the wind that lashed his face until it was raw. Each stride through snow that reached his knees felt like wading through viscous material. His injured leg protested, but Hank pressed on, concentrating on the unmoving form ahead. "Sir, are you all right?" Hank called out, his voice nearly lost in the tempestuous wind. The man looked up, his face pallid and his lips acquiring a bluish tinge. No reply was forthcoming, merely a feeble nod. "Come with me right now." Hank grasped the stranger's arm, bearing his weight as they labored back towards the inviting warmth of the truck's cabin. Once within, Hank enveloped the man in his emergency covering, dispensed hot coffee from his insulated flask, and meticulously sealed all windows against the frigid influx of air. "Rest a bit," Hank uttered gently. "When morning comes, I'll find a way to help you get where you need to go." The man assented with gratitude, his eyelids heavy with weariness as the warmth started to restore feeling to his frostbitten extremities. Externally, the radio communications persisted, with some truckers questioning Hank's choice to provide aid, while others lapsed into quietude. Yet, in the gentle illumination of the dashboard indicators, none of that held significance. What was paramount was that an individual would not succumb to the freezing temperatures that night. Throughout that extended night, Hank maintained the cabin heater at a high setting, while he himself reclined uncomfortably in the driver's seat. The unfamiliar individual slept soundly, stirring occasionally with a cough that seemed to agitate his entire body. Each time, Hank merely provided water, refraining from any inquiries. Years of military service had ingrained in him the understanding that, at times, quietude was the most profound act of kindness one could extend to someone in hardship. Outside, the blizzard continued its relentless onslaught, covering the highway in drifts that accumulated with each passing hour. The sporadic illumination from passing snowplows projected unsettling shadows across the cabin's interior. As dawn approached, the snowfall had diminished, though a delicate layer still obscured the morning light. The man stirred, assuming a more upright posture. Vitality returned to his complexion. He surveyed his surroundings, reorienting himself, then observed Hank with lucid, discerning eyes. "Thank you," he stated simply. His voice possessed an inherent authoritativeness despite its hoarseness. Hank nodded. "Glad you're feeling better. I can try to help you get where you need to go once the plow's clear enough road. Is there someone I should call for you? Family? Friends?" The gentleman regarded Hank with deliberation, then reached into the inner pocket of his coat. His hands, though still rigid from the cold, moved with an accustomed sureness. He produced a time-worn metallic identification document. Its face was marred by age, yet the inscription remained legible. ADM Nicholas T. Graves, U.S. Navy. Hank gazed at the card, momentarily taken aback. 2 decades of military service had ingrained certain automatic responses within him. While he did not assume a formal stance, his bearing instinctively improved. "You're an admiral, sir," Admiral Graves acknowledged with a subtle inclination of his head, his demeanor steadfast, as though being extricated by a truck operator amidst a blizzard was an entirely commonplace event. "I was en route to a memorial service for a former comrade," he elucidated, his voice gaining strength. "My chauffeur became suddenly unwell in the preceding town. I believed I could handle the final 20 miles independently, but the tempest arrived more swiftly than anticipated. The GPS malfunctioned. Then, the rented vehicle skidded off the road somewhere in that direction." He gestured vaguely towards the window. "I had been walking for approximately 2 hours before you intervened." Hank processed this intelligence without remark. His life experiences had taught him that official standing seldom shielded anyone from the arbitrary harshness of existence. Inclement weather, the passage of time, and mortality made no allowances for Admiral's insignia. "Any rank deserves respect, sir," Hank said quietly. "But I was just logistics corps in the Marines. Not exactly someone who'd normally be giving aid to Navy brass." The Admiral's weathered visage softened somewhat. "And I was just a frozen old man on a highway last night, Corporal Monroe." Hank Monroe, retired 2004. Admiral Graves nodded slowly. "Well, Corporal Monroe, I've learned that sometimes the most important chain of command is simply human being to human being." He glanced out the window at the gradually lightening sky. "I appreciate your discretion as well. Not all would recognize that sometimes an admiral might prefer not to call in the cavalry for a personal mistake." Hank dispensed another serving of coffee from his insulated container, presenting it to the Admiral. "I comprehend, sir. No individual merits succumbing to the elements whilst en route to commemorate a fallen comrade." The Admiral took the cup, his hands enveloping its warmth. He scrutinized Hank's countenance for a protracted moment, then placed a hand resolutely on Hank's shoulder. "Thank you, and do not be concerned. I remember very clearly the name of the man who just saved my life." An element in the Admiral's tone, a certitude, a commitment, lingered in the space between them. The radio crackled into activity, declaring that snowplows had cleared the primary route ahead. Truckers were being permitted passage in regulated convoys. "I can get you to the police station in the next town," Hank offered. "They should be able to arrange transportation for you." Admiral Graves nodded. "That would be appropriate. Thank you." As Hank started the engine and carefully maneuvered the large vehicle back onto the gradually clearing highway, neither individual spoke extensively. Certain experiences foster a unique form of respect that obviates the need for conversation. The road ahead gleamed with fresh snow in the morning light, and Hank drove with caution, mindful of his distinguished passenger. In his rearview mirror, the desperate scene of the previous night had disappeared beneath immaculate white drifts, as if it had never transpired. Hank transported Admiral Graves to the closest police station as soon as the thoroughfares were passable. The officers in the small town appeared perplexed by the Admiral's arrival, yet they swiftly organized a private chamber for him to place telephone calls. The Admiral declined offers of medical assistance, despite Hank's apprehensions concerning potential hypothermia. "Navy men don't catch colds," he had remarked with a faint trace of a smile, dismissing Hank's concern. "I need to make contact with my security detail," was his sole explanation before he vanished into the station's office with the chief. Hank did not linger. He had a delivery to finish, already postponed by the storm. He merely gave a respectful nod to the Admiral, received a solid handshake in reciprocation, and proceeded with his duties. By evening, Hank had completed his freight delivery, cleaned his truck, and gone back to his unassuming dwelling in the Millbrook suburbs. Life reverted to its customary rhythm. The meeting with the Admiral became just another tale he refrained from sharing. Meanwhile, at the Eastern Naval Command Center, Admiral Graves was seated at his desk, his fingers interlaced beneath his chin. Before him lay a slender dossier, a service record for one Corporal Henry Hank Monroe, USMC, retired. "He didn't mention his service?" asked Commander Phillips, his aide. "Not a word," the Admiral replied, studying the photograph clipped to the file. "Just pulled me from the storm and asked for nothing. Didn't even tell me he'd served." The aide nodded appreciatively. "Rare quality these days, sir." "Indeed." Admiral Graves tapped the folder thoughtfully. "His house needs work. Heating systems probably original to the 70s from the looks of it. And did you see that porch, sir?" The Admiral looked up, a determined expression crossing his face. "Commander, I want you to assemble a team. Engineering, construction, electrical specialists, the best we have." "May I ask the objective, sir?" Admiral Graves smiled. "A special mission, one long overdue." 3 weeks elapsed. January arrived with clearer atmospheric conditions but more profound cold. Hank utilized his off-duty periods to mend his porch railing, which had suffered damage from years of Pennsylvania winters. The timber had decayed in certain areas, and he painstakingly substituted each segment, applying paint as he progressed. On a Tuesday morning, with frost still adhering to the vegetation, Hank was applying a new layer of white paint to the recently erected railings when the sound of engines disturbed the neighborhood's tranquility. One vehicle, then a second, then 6 military jeeps proceeded onto his street, all displaying Navy emblems. They maneuvered with exactitude, establishing an imposing formation along the curb before his dwelling. Neighbors observed from their windows. Mrs. Donovan from across the street made no effort to conceal her observation, stepping onto her front porch with a coffee cup, gazing openly. A youthful officer in complete formal attire alighted from the foremost vehicle, neared Hank's gate, and inquired, "Pardon me, is this the dwelling of Mr. Hank Monroe?" Hank set down his paintbrush, wiping his hands on his aged work trousers. "Yes, that is I." The officer stood more erect, his bearing flawless. "Sir, we have been deployed under direct instructions from Admiral Nicholas Graves. He has requested our assistance with repairs to your home's heating system, roof, and porch structure." Hank blinked, momentarily bereft of speech. He cast a glance at the procession of vehicles where additional uniformed Navy personnel stood at attention. That's really not necessary. I just did what anyone would." The officer executed a sharp salute. "Sir, with all due respect," Admiral Graves was quite clear. His exact words were, "This man saved my life when he had no obligation to do so. The Navy takes care of its own, and anyone who helps one of ours becomes one of ours." Before Hank could voice further objections, the team was already disembarking with their tools. They operated with military swiftness. Some inspected his deteriorating heating unit, while others evaluated the roof using specialized apparatus. A senior officer came forward holding a file. "Mr. Monroe, we've reviewed your service record as well. Marine Corps Logistics 1984 to 2004. Honorable discharge following injury sustained in the line of duty. Hank shifted uneasily. Just a transport accident. Nothing heroic. 20 years of service speaks for itself, sir. Admiral Graves also noted you didn't mention your service background when you helped him. He had to look it up himself. For a period of 3 days, Hank's tranquil dwelling transformed into a hub of intense work. Navy engineers substituted his malfunctioning heating unit with a cutting-edge model. Roofing experts strengthened and mended deteriorated portions. Electricians modernized his entire household's wiring to adhere to current safety regulations. Neighbors observed with astonishment. Some neared with caution, posing inquiries. For the initial occasion in many years, Hank found himself conversing with individuals he had resided alongside yet scarcely knew. Mrs. Donovan presented a freshly baked apple dessert on the second day. "Never knew we had a hero living across the street all these years," she remarked, handing him the still warm treat. "I'm no hero, ma'am," Hank protested. "Just did my job, like these fellas here." She gave him a knowing look. "That's exactly what my herald used to say. He was at Incheon. Never thought himself special either." By the third day, a small gathering of neighborhood youngsters had assembled to observe the Navy crew at work. One lad, approximately 10 years of age, approached Hank with wide-eyed curiosity. "Mister, are you like a secret agent or something?" Hank chuckled. "No, son. Just an old truck driver who gave someone a ride. But they're fixing your whole house." Hank pondered this for a moment, then crouched to the boy's eye level. "Sometimes, Tommy, when you help someone without expecting anything back, the world has a funny way of helping you right back." The boy nodded gravely, as if absorbing a significant life principle. Late that afternoon, the work team's leader, Commander Richardson, invited Hank to inspect the completed renovations. As they walked through the house, Hank could barely recognize his own home. The ancient furnace that had wheezed and groaned through countless winters had been replaced with an efficient system that hummed quietly. The roof no longer held patches upon patches. Even the electrical wiring, which had worried him for years but always seemed too expensive to replace, had been completely redone to modern standards. "It's too much," Hank said, emotion tightening his voice. Commander Richardson shook his head. "Admiral's orders, sir. And between us," he made it clear this was personal, not official Navy business. He wanted to be here himself. "But there's a situation in the South China Sea requiring his attention." On the concluding day, as the team readied for departure, the young officer who had initially approached him tendered a wooden plaque. The artistry was superb, evidently handcrafted. Etched upon its surface were the words, "Veteran Shelter, honored by honor itself." Admiral Graves had this commissioned specially, the officer elucidated. He asked that it be placed somewhere visible. Hank ran his fingers over the carved letters, unexpected emotion tightening his throat. Tell him I'm grateful." "But it wasn't necessary." The officer smiled. "He said you'd say exactly that." His response was, "Necessity has nothing to do with honor, Corporal Monroe." As the Navy vehicles departed, Mrs. Donovan traversed the street, her inquisitiveness ultimately surmounting her diffidence. "Hank Monroe," she declared, hands on her hips. "In 30 years as neighbors, you never once mentioned you knew admirals." Hank chuckled softly. "I didn't. Not until 3 weeks ago." Gradually, he recounted the encounter during the blizzard. As he spoke, other neighbors congregated, listening. For the initial occasion, many learned of his military service, his years on the road, his solitary existence. "You mean to tell me?" Mr. Patel from 2 doors down interjected. "You picked up a stranded man in a blizzard without knowing who he was, and he turned out to be an admiral?" Hank shrugged. "Wouldn't have mattered if he'd been a janitor. Storm like that, you don't leave anyone outside." That evening, subsequent to everyone's departure, Hank reclined on his newly mended porch. The dwelling possessed a distinct ambience, somehow. Not solely due to the refurbishments, but because for the initial occasion in many years, it felt less like a mere place of return and more like a home where he truly belonged. He meticulously affixed the wooden plaque adjacent to his front entrance, positioned where the morning sun would illuminate its inscription. From that day onward, Hank continued to traverse his customary routes, deliver his shipments punctually, and largely maintain his solitude. Yet, an alteration had occurred in the underlying structure of his tranquil life. Commenced with understated gestures. A handwritten expression of gratitude materialized in his mailbox from a veteran who had become aware of the incident. Subsequently, another arrived and then another. One morning, he discovered a neatly folded American flag positioned on his doorstep, accompanied by a plain card bearing the message, "From one who serves to one who remembers what service means." The local VFW hall, which Hank had consistently abstained from visiting despite numerous invitations over the years, suddenly had members acknowledging him by name at the grocery store. The VFW commander personally visited to invite him to their monthly meetings. "We'd be honored to have you join us," the commander said simply. Hank accepted with a quiet nod. He did not pursue acknowledgement for what had transpired. When questioned, he would merely state, "Just helped someone who needed it." Nothing special about that. Yet, the narrative had assumed a vitality of its own, particularly within veteran communities. It was not centered on the Admiral's official standing or the Navy's reaction. It concerned the straightforward, unwavering choice to provide assistance when others had counseled prudence or apathy. The account disseminated more widely than Hank comprehended. A journalist from the local newspaper telephoned, expressing a desire to produce a feature article. Hank courteously declined. The County Veterans Affairs Office dispatched representatives to inquire if he would address school students regarding service and civic responsibility. Once more, he declined. "I'm not good with speeches," he elucidated, "and the story's simple enough without me telling it." What Hank was unaware of was that Admiral Graves had been observing from a distance. Through unobtrusive means, he kept track of Hank's quiet self-respect, his gentle refusals of public acknowledgement. In the latter part of February, the Admiral placed a call to an old acquaintance at the Pentagon. By March, an official correspondence reached Hank's residence. He opened it with calloused hands, reading slowly, "In recognition of service above and beyond the call of duty, both in uniform and as a civilian, exemplifying the highest ideals of American citizenship." The letter extended an invitation to Washington for a ceremony at which he would be presented with a civilian service medal. Hank sat with the letter for several days, uncertain how to proceed. Finally, he telephoned the number provided. "I appreciate the honor," he informed the aide who answered, "but I'd prefer not to make a fuss. Please thank the Admiral for me." 2 days later, his telephone rang. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. "Corporal Monroe, this is Admiral Graves." "Sir," Hank replied, automatically sitting straighter, though no one could see him. "I understand you've declined our invitation to Washington." "Yes, sir. I don't need recognition for doing what's right." There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. "You know, Monroe, in all my years of service, I've pinned medals on men who craved them and men who felt they didn't deserve them. But you're the first to make me reconsider the whole concept of recognition itself." Hank remained silent, unsure how to respond. "Would you permit me a compromise?" the Admiral continued. "No Washington, no cameras, no speeches. Just a small ceremony at your local VFW. For the record, not for show." Something in the Admiral's tone, a genuine respect, moved Hank. "I could manage that, sir." Spring made its entrance, dissolving the severe hold of winter. At the VFW's yearly acknowledgement event, Hank reclined awkwardly in a neatly ironed shirt, nursing a solitary beer, endeavoring to merge with the surroundings. The chamber abruptly grew quiet as an eminent individual made his way in. Admiral Graves, presently in complete formal attire embellished with ribbons and commendations, accompanied by 2 aides. The Admiral surveyed the room, located Hank, and proceeded directly towards him. Those in close proximity respectfully stepped aside. Hank initiated a move to stand, but the Admiral gestured for him to stay seated and instead occupied the chair beside him. "Corporal Monroe," he said warmly, extending his hand. "I've been meaning to thank you properly." "No need for thanks, sir. You've done more than enough with the repairs." Admiral Graves shook his head. "That day, I lost signal, lost direction, but you pulled me back from the cold. Now, I just wanted to make sure you'll always stay warm enough." A small smile crossed Hank's weathered face. "I just stopped to help someone who needed it. Old soldier's reflex, I suppose." The Admiral studied him thoughtfully. "That night, you told me you were just logistics." "There's no just in any service, Corporal. The ones who move supplies, who ensure everything gets where it needs to go, they're the backbone. Without logistics, the fanciest battleship is just a metal island with hungry sailors." Hank emitted a soft chuckle at that. "You know," the Admiral went on, "they inform me you haven't accepted any acknowledgement for what you did." "Don't need recognition for doing what's right, sir." Admiral Graves nodded, understanding evident in his gaze. "The best ones never do." Subsequently, in a modest ceremony attended solely by local veterans, Admiral Graves bestowed upon Hank a medal, not one officially recognized in military records, but a distinct commendation fashioned for the event. Its inscription simply stated, "For reminding us what matters most." As conversations around them resumed, the two men sat in comfortable silence, separated by rank but united by something more fundamental than military hierarchy, a shared understanding that beneath uniforms and titles, the most important duty was simply to one another. That evening, as Hank drove home, streetlights reflected off his truck's windshield. The road ahead stretched dark and empty. But unlike before, it no longer felt lonely. Sometimes the greatest rewards come not from what we receive, but from the quiet certainty that when the moment called, we answered.